So, my first ever real distinct memory of anything strange or paranormal from when I was a kid was when I was about 6 years old. When me and my sister were younger, our aunts took care of us, and my parents were working full time. And my aunt Mercy, we spent almost every day with her. And so after school, we would always go to my Mima's house. We would go to my grandmother's house. And we grew up in the projects, and we were only a couple buildings apart. So my parents had bought me and my sister a bunch of books on tape so that you could follow along and learn to associate the words with the sounds you were hearing, and eventually, it would click and you would learn how to read. We had Disney books and Berenstain Bear books, and so I remember one night, it was pretty late, I want to say. I was about 6, my sister was like 4 years old, and we were sitting in my Mima's kitchen, and the apartment was dead quiet, and my aunt, had the radio and the book open in front of us, and we were following the audiobook. I remember those books had like two sides to them. Side A was like the story, and side B, it was blank, and you were able to record yourself reading so that you knew if you were progressing or not. So my aunt, after we were done with the story, she, we went to side B, and she started recording us reading with the book, and she was helping me. I distinctly remember her helping me read and sound out words and everything. This still creeps me out to this day because I remember it so vividly. I remember all the experiences I've had really vividly, and I just confirmed this story with her a little while ago before I started filming. So she's helping me read the pages on the book, and we were doing that for a little while. When we played it back, there was this really eerie, inexplainable, disembodied sound that played through on the tape. And I remember her rewinding it and saying, what was that? We didn't hear anything while we were recording. We didn't hear anything while we were reading. The whole apartment was silent. No one was in the living room watching TV. Everyone was in the rooms, and it was just, that's why it sticks out to me, is because I remember how silent it was. It was night. It was probably 8-9 o'clock at night, if not a little maybe earlier, but I remember it was so quiet. It was weird. We tried remembering what the sound was like, and for me she remembered it sounding very odd, and she couldn't make out what it could have been. For me, it sounded like a mixture of a voice and like a sort of weird screeching or something. And I don't know, that's the first thing that I remember ever happening to me as a kid was that weird sound we caught on tape. And I remember even for a few years after, like, listen, I would every once in a while, when I was almost a teenager, every once in a while I would pop that tape in, I would remember that sound, and I would hear us, and I would laugh at us trying to read the book because, I was a kid. I was just starting to learn how to read, and I remember that sound always creeped me out. Ever since I was young, I remember when I was like 2-3 years old and I stopped being in a crib, all the way up until I was about 6, maybe even 7 years old. I remember constantly waking up in the middle of the night and feeling like there was something in the room that wasn't supposed to be there. I never actually saw anything, but it was habitual. It felt like it was on an almost nightly basis. I never really slept completely through the night. Growing up, we had a very small apartment. It was a project apartment, and the layout was like, once you walk through the front door, the living room was right straight ahead. To the left was a very tiny dining area. To the right of that was a little tiny sort of kitchen nook. And on the left of the dining area was me and my sister's room. You sort of walked around by the dining area, and there was this little minute tiny hallway. And to the right was the bathroom, and then there was my parents' room, which was all the way at the edge of, at the end of the apartment. But it was very, very tiny. I want to say it was less than 500 square feet of space, if not a little smaller than that. So I remember always waking up in the middle of the night. My sister would be dead asleep, and I would just wake up completely filled with fear and feeling like there was something in the room with us that just wasn't supposed to be there. And I would lay there and I would contemplate running to my parents' room for what was probably just a few minutes, but it always felt like an eternity. And I just remember, I still feel it, sometimes. I remember that feeling of just being unsettled and feeling like, something was maybe under my bed or something, and I didn't want to jump off the bed because I felt like something was gonna try to grab me. I would just lay there for what really, it just felt like such a long time, and I would finally grab the courage. I would plan it all out in my head and be like, as soon as your feet hit the ground, you run. You head to the door and you run to your parents' room. I did that for years. I would always, as soon as I would get into the room, I would always feel really bad, but I would tap my mother and they would just pick me up and let me, sleep with them. And I would always feel safe. As long as I was in between my parents, I would always feel safe. Since I was a kid, I just remember feeling, it could have been in my head, and and a lot of kids experience that where they're afraid of the dark, but it wasn't always like that. There were certain times where it would be in the middle of the day. Like when me and my sister were about 9-10 years old, we were able to stay at the apartment by ourselves sometimes, when we had days off of school or maybe summer vacation. And I remember it would be sometimes in the middle of the day and I would need to get something from the room, and we were in the living room watching TV, or I would have to get something from my parents' room. Maybe the remote stopped working in the living room. As I was heading toward where I was going, all of a sudden, I just felt like something is not right. Something is there. I wouldn't always feel it. I don't feel it everywhere I go, but throughout my life, I've felt that. I felt like I can sense when something that is not normally there is lingering. So that voice that I heard on tape was the first audible thing that I remember experiencing that was out of the ordinary. And this next thing, this shadow, was the first visual thing that I remember happening, and it's just every once in a while it just plays in my mind, and I see it like I did when I was a kid. I was about, I want to say 7-8 years old. I don't know how old are you when you're in 4th grade? I forget, but I remember it was my last year of public school before I started I spent a few years going to Catholic school, which that in itself was a fucking paranormal nightmare. So my aunt that used to take care of us on a regular basis, she used to pick us up in the mornings and walk us to school. She used to make sure we got all our stuff together, and would make sure she would help us get ready, and she would make sure we had everything we needed for the day. She would go pick up lunch with us, and I remember it was my last year of public school for a while, and I was in 4th grade. And every morning, so my parents worked really early in the morning. I think they used to leave at like 5:30, 6 o'clock. I think they had to be at work at 7 or whatever. So we had, from the time my parents left the house to before my aunt got there, was about maybe an hour and a half that we were there by ourselves. It was maybe like 5 something in the morning, and I remember I woke up because I heard my parents moving around the apartment, and I heard them, talking and leave out the door, and I would hear the doors lock. I looked, I would look outside, and I remember it was kind of like twilight outside. There was a very soft bluish glow. It's like this weird haunting bluish color that the sky gets before the sun starts to rise. So I was up already. I wasn't tired, and I knew I had about an hour to kill off. And every once in a while I would use this time to like finish homework that I didn't want to do in the afternoon, or I would break out my little action figures and I would start just playing with them, or I'd take out a notebook and start drawing. But on this day, I remember I just wanted to lay in bed and sort of daydream. I remember just the way our beds were at the time was one of my beds was parallel to the doorway, and I could see my sister's bed was all the way on the other side of the room, and I could see right through. Like if I looked at the foot of my bed, I would be staring at the hallway wall. It wasn't a big hallway, it was just the wall that was across, from my bedroom. And I could see a little bit into the tiny kitchen. So I remember I was just daydreaming and not really thinking of anything, and I kept just looking around the room. I didn't feel anything strange, I didn't feel anything weird. It was dead quiet, and out of nowhere, out of the blue, is this black shadow that is walking across the wall in the hallway. And I remember I was just laying there staring at the wall, and I just saw this black figure. I can still see it in my mind. It was a male figure, I want to say, and it just walked across like taking a walk in the park. It was like it didn't even know I was there. It was like our parallel universes converged for a second, and then it just everything snapped back to normal, and I just caught a glimpse of something that I wasn't supposed to. It was so weird. It was a dark black crystal clear silhouette of a guy just walking across the wall. And I don't remember freaking out. I remember that summer telling my friends what happened, because I was hearing all the kids talking about how they thought the school was haunted, and the school was right across the street from our building. And one of my friends was talking about how he was walking up the stairwell one time in the school, and he had 3 scratch marks down his arm, and he didn't even feel it. And then he noticed it when he got on the hallway, and it was out of nowhere. And I told them my story, and they were like, oh yeah, well, everybody knows this place is like, all these buildings are on top of Indian burial grounds or whatever. I don't know how much credence you could really give to stuff like that. I'm sure that there's like more prevalence of activity where you had old sacred spaces and places where people used to live. But my boyfriend always tells me, he's like, people have died everywhere. Like, we've been here for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Everywhere is going to have something going on. But yeah, I've never seen anything like that again. I just thought it was so weird how I didn't feel anything strange. I wasn't afraid. I didn't freak out. But I remember being stunned for a few minutes, and then I got out of the bed and I was like, I have to explain this to my mind right now because I this doesn't make sense. And I remember walking to the kitchen, which was like 2 feet away. It was like, and I was like, maybe it could have. I was trying to make it make sense in my mind. I thought maybe there was a moth that flew by a light bulb, and I was like moving my hand by the kitchen light to see if maybe the shadow would have reflected and looked a certain way. And I went to the living room. I went into my parents' room, and I was like, maybe one of them didn't leave. Like, I was so honestly confused more than anything. And I don't remember telling my parents anything. I think I remember telling my mom a few years later because I just didn't want to seem like I was crazy. And I only felt comfortable telling my friends in school because they were all already talking about ghosts in the school and everything. So I felt like my guard was down. I could, talk to someone about it. So all throughout my youth and my adulthood and my whole life, really, I've more in certain spaces than in others. I haven't experienced it for a while now, but ever since growing up, every once in a while I catch something darting at the corner of my eye, or some weird movement, or something happening in the corner of my eye. And it wasn't until I moved into my first apartment and I started doing some research. And I guess there's a thing that people tend to experience, and they call them the shadow people. And they're just, people see them as black figures that mostly disappear as soon as you move your head a certain way, or you see something dart in the corner of your vision, and you never really see anything full on. And it's not until, the dawn of technology where, we're always recording everything and we're catching a lot of things that can't be explained. I'm sure a lot of things, because this is the internet and it's people, and people are stupid and they want attention. A lot of things are created using video software, but there's a lot of things that I know that I've experienced, so I don't like to jump to a conclusion and say that someone else's experience is fake or fraudulent, because I know what I've experienced. And it was a lot growing up in that first apartment in my parents' first house here on Long Island. I would get the weird feeling once in a while that something was around, but I didn't really see too many things from the corner of my eye. I used to see that a lot when I was a kid. And one of my other apartments, I used to catch a lot of random weird things. It just looks like someone's moving in the corner of your eye. And then when you turn, of course, nothing's there. I guess shadow people's a thing. A lot of people experience it, and I thought maybe I was seeing things, or maybe it was optical illusions. And it wasn't until I started reading a lot of people's recounts of similar experiences that I started actually believing that this was an actual phenomena. I'm not the only one in my family that has had weird experiences. It's not all across the board, and I want to say it's mostly on my mother's side. But my Mima, my mother's mother, she's experienced a lot of weird shit. And I want to one day sit with my aunts and go over all of the odd experiences she's had. My mother, my aunt Mercy, my aunt Myrna, my aunt Maria, my aunt Yogi. It's really all the chicks in my family that I know that have experienced very weird, unexplainable stuff. And all those stories that they've told me, they always stick out in my mind, and I always remember them. They're not my stories to tell, but it's just strange how we're all, within the same vicinity of each other as far as family goes, and And I think it's cool that we've all had odd experiences that we, get to share with each other. And you kind of, when you have people you can talk to about stuff like that and connect with, it just confirms that you're not crazy. You're not off your rocker, Other people, it's people that you trust. It's not strangers just mouthing off on, just making up stuff. It's people you trust and people you've grown up with. That really kind of solidifies the trust that you need to have to I think when it's family, you have this bond and you have a trust, and they're not blowing smoke up your ass and just trying to tell some crazy story. And I think it's odd, but I think it's cool that we all sort of share that.
Like, subscribe, comment, share some of your experiences. Worship me, but the Google will get you.